Deswegen sollten wir jetzt über das Verhältnis zwischen BIPoC-Community, Wahlen und Politik sprechen. Und das Ganze moderiert nicht irgendwer, nein, das macht die großartige Professorin und Doktorin Maisha-Auma. Sie ist Erziehungswissenschaftlerin, Geschlechterforscherin und Feminismus. Und sie hat unfassbar viele spannende Forschungsschwerpunkte. Ich habe ja noch nicht mal ein Studium beenden können. Maisha macht in Wissenschaft quasi alles, aber auch zu den Themen Intersektionalität, Diversität in Bildung oder auch Critical Whiteness. Jetzt kommt Maisha und ich freue mich sehr, sehr auf ihre GästInnen.
From the middle of the center of post-migrant and post-colonial Berlin. Welcome to the panel, Transnational Perspectives on Election and Participation.
Willkommen zum
and
Panel.
Thank you so much to the lovely Tarek for your kind words and for your kind introduction. It's
Vielen Dank an lieben Tarek für diese Einführung.
and to be able to chair this panel.
Es ist super schön, hier zu sein, sich dieses Panel zu teilen.
14 days, well, 16 days.
Wir sind nur 14, naja eigentlich 16 Tage weg von der Bundestagswahl in Deutschland. Zeitgleich gibt es 2 Landtagswahlen in Mecklenburg-Vorpommern und in Berlin. Heute reden wir mit Gästinnen, die aus verschiedenen geopolitischen Regionen kommen und ihre Perspektiven in Bezug auf marginalisierte Communities mit uns teilen. Wir haben 3 Gäste und ungefähr 1 Stunde Zeit. Was ich jetzt machen werde, ist meine GästInnen nach und nach einzuführen und dann machen wir 3 Runden. In der ersten Runde geht es vor allem um die Arbeit, die meine GästInnen leisten, was politische Inklusion für sie bedeutet, in Bezug auf dieses Engagement, das intersektionale Engagement, in Bezug auf die Rechte, politische Teilhabe und gleichberechtigte Leben marginalisierter Communities. Runde 2 wird darum gehen, wie sieht die politische Landschaft eigentlich aus? Wie viele politische RepräsentantInnen gibt es, die in der Parteienlandschaft da sind? Ich werde so ein bisschen gucken, wie sieht das eigentlich aus im postmigrantischen Deutschland und meine Gästinnen fragen, wie das in ihren respektiven Gegenden aussieht. Wer gewinnt gerade politische Teilhabe und was sind die Hürden? In der dritten Runde geht es vor allem um Hürden. Eine der Hürden ist, desto mehr die politischen Landschaften in unseren Ländern, vor allem jene, die sich als der West inszenieren, der Westen, desto mehr diese politische Landschaft sich diversifiziert, desto mehr werden wir auch attackiert. Und der Widerstand aus der politischen Rechten und unsere Arbeit anzugreifen.
BIPoC of racially marginalized groups and against what circumstances are we trying to normalize?
Also gegen welche Verhältnisse versuchen wir eigentlich unsere politische Teilhabe zu normalisieren? Somit geht es jetzt direkt in die erste Runde. Ich möchte mit dir anfangen, Edith.
Edith Espínola, you are an activist of
Edith Espínola.
Servicio, Doméstico, Activo.
Du bist Aktivistin, unter anderem bei Doméstico, Activo. Sorry, mein Spanisch ist eigentlich non-existent. Ich bin super aufgeregt, hier mit dir reden zu können. Du kommst aus Paraguay, bist Aktivistin, wohnst in Spanien seit den letzten 12 Jahren, bist antirassistische und antikoloniale Aktivistin, hast BWL studiert und bist zudem Sprecherin für Servicio Activo, wie auch andere Organisationen, die sich in Bezug auf die Rechte von illegalisierten MigrantInnen in Spanien einsetzen.
Every industry, because I'm a foodie, obviously of the food industry as well, is one of the themes very close to my heart. And you're at the same time a treasurer of the Latinas Network and co-director of the Empowerment Center.
Zudem bist du Schatzmeisterin
which is the only one of its kind in Spain.
und Präsidentin des Zentrums in Spanien, das sich um Pflegekräfte und deren Schutz bemüht.
And I would like to ask you to give us a perspective. Please tell us
Ich möchte dich gerne um deine Perspektive bitten. Welche Arbeit machst du genau? Was bedeutet politische Inklusion für dich in diesem Fokus der Legalisierung von Pflegekräften und illegalisierten MigrantInnen in Spanien, die verschiedene politische Stati haben?
La persona migrante, antes que nada, saludarles a todos. Estoy muy encantada de estar aquí en Alemania. Es la primera vez que vengo a Berlín. Es un placer estar con compañeras y compañeros que representan nuestra cultura, lo que somos y lo que para mí siempre importa, la inclusión.
We are slightly lost in translation.
Yeah. No sé si continuar, porque si tú no me puedes...
We are slightly lost in translation. So what we're going to do, Edith, thank you so much. I'm going to come back to you in a second. This is what happens when we sometimes meet at transnational points. So we're going to work with it. We're going to be okay. I am going to switch to my guest, who would have been the second guest, but now you're...
Also es gab kleine Übersetzungsprobleme und ich wende mich jetzt meiner zweiten Gästin zu, die als zweites sowieso dran gewesen wäre. Ich stelle sie erstmal vor. Halimo, Hussain, herzlich willkommen. Super schön, dich hier zu haben. Du kommst aus, du bist organisiert bei Akwaaba und Black Lives Matter UK. Bist schon einige Zeit lang Aktivistin in Nordengland. Vor allem fokussiert auf antirassistische Initiativen, die sich mit staatlichem Rassismus beschäftigen, und hast an einer Vielzahl von Kampagnen mitgearbeitet, die die antirassistische Agenda in UK vorangebracht haben. Beispielsweise in Bezug auf Dekolonisierungsversuche der Universitäten. Decolonizing Your Mind trägt auch deine Handschrift.
And in 2017, you made headlines as an organizer of a protest against the presence of colonial nostalgia.
2017 hast du Schlagzeilen gemacht in Bezug auf Gentrifizierung und den Kampf gegen die Normalisierung von kolonialen Figuren. Das hat eine Debatte rund um Winston Churchill angefeuert und im Allgemeinen über die Präsenz von kolonialen Figuren. Du arbeitest als Diversity Managerin weiterhin in der höheren Bildung. Zudem bist du noch aktiv im Community Organizing und siehst dich in der sogenannten radikalen schwarzen Tradition, die du versuchst, in den Räumen, in denen du bist, anzuwenden. Außerdem ist es dir wichtig, Black Lives Matter größer im UK zu machen. Du bist zudem aktives Mitglied in weiteren Gruppen.
As a children's volunteer, and in your organizing, you share reflections by writing and speaking at events. These range from decolonization, race and racialization, to the importance of Black and Palestinian solidarity, as well as many other topics relating to anti-racism. This is absolutely impressive.
Really long.
Where you're active, yes, but
Dieser Lebenslauf ist beeindruckend und einige Informationen habe ich ja auch nicht gecatcht, weil die Moderatorin leider zu schnell redet oder sehr schnell. Ich bin gleich wieder drin. Sag uns bitte, wie für dich politische Teilhabe aussieht, vor allem im Hinblick auf all diese solidarischen Projekte, in denen du dich um Gerechtigkeit bemühst. in einer sehr rassifizierten Gesellschaft.
Thanks so much for having me here. I'm really excited to be discussing with lots of incredible activists and hearing about what's happening in Berlin and in Germany and also elsewhere. So political inclusion, for me, it looks like amplifying the voices of, I'm sorry, I'm getting a bit of a translation, but for me, it's about amplifying the voices of the most marginalized, but also trying to meet their needs. So for some, I think when they think about political inclusion, they think about representational politics. In the UK, we actually have like a far-right government, which is like incredibly diverse in terms of like its makeup in the cabinet, which is like the most sort of like senior figures within the political party. And it's been to our detriment, I think, as like incredibly diverse racialized community, because what we've seen is particular communities, like a division being sown between different communities. We've seen, black and brown figures being used to weaponize and sort of like trample over our pain and hurt within our communities, and also like be used as figures to peddle far-right talking points. And that is really difficult to question. I think it really confuses like white people who look at like, people like Priti Patel, who is like the Home Secretary, but is like, and this is the kindest way that I can say it, like the spectre of all evil. She's awful. And I think like having people within those kind of like positions of political power, it's become increasingly difficult to like engage in this like really toxic culture war.
Es wird immer schwieriger, sich einzubringen in diesem toxischen Umfeld, wo Menschen als Waffen benutzt werden und gegeneinander ausgespielt werden. Und man versucht dadurch abzulenken von den eigentlichen Problemen in den Communities, die eigentlich noch durch die Pandemie verstärkt wurden.
Within the UK to the current sort of like modus operandi of this government.
In UK ist jetzt die Regierung auch sehr rechts.
Liberal sort of governments, and that's because I think we need to think more broadly, not about like
wir müssen versuchen, nicht nur über diese verschiedenen Parteien nachzudenken, sondern auch, wie sie als Parteien funktionieren und wie wir Alternativen schaffen können.
What your engagement means and what your strategies would be to change it. So I'm going to take the question of weaponization and put it into our second round, but I would like to ask you more specifically about the year 2020. So what we have is the visual representation of the hashtag Black Lives Matter movement, which is already 7 years old last year, and which has formed a transnational
decentralized
coalition of action, actually. Yeah. And I'd like to ask about what happened in 2020 in the UK context. What has changed since then? There was this thing that hashtag Black Lives Matter is going mainstream, or it's been very popularized. Tell me something about what happened in the UK, and I can also say something about the German context.
In UK in diesem Rahmen passiert ist, und ich erzähle dir dann, wie es in Deutschland aussieht. Black Lives Matter in UK besteht schon seit 2016. Es ist eine Schwesterorganisation des amerikanischen Chapters, und die sind ja entstanden nach der Ermordung von Trayvon Martin, und so begann dann das Movement sozusagen durch den Hashtag, und in UK begann es in 2016, und 2020 war sehr aufgewühltes Jahr, aber auch sehr spannend im Hinblick auf Organisierung. Wir haben die größten Proteste seit den 60er Jahren gesehen, Millionen von Menschen, die mobilisiert wurden, die auf die Straße gingen, die Gerechtigkeit gefordert haben. Jetzt ist es ein Jahr später und ich will nicht pessimistisch sein, aber ja, es gibt verschiedene Arten, wie man das betrachten kann. Also wenn man jetzt auf die Politik im Hinblick auf Wahlen spricht, gibt es sehr viel Diskussion auch zum Beispiel in Sport gab es diese Aktion, dass einige Sportler so auf die Knie gegangen sind, um damit ein Zeichen zu setzen. Und es ist dieses Thema Rassismus, Antirassismus ist in das Zentrum gerückt vom politischen Diskurs, gesellschaftlichen Diskurs. Also, und es hat auch zu Veränderungen geführt, aber die sind noch nicht wirklich sichtbar, greifbar, diese Änderungen. Wir haben als Organisation letztes Jahr mehr als 1 Million Pounds konnten wir an Spenden sammeln und die haben wir an Grassroots-Organisationen in den Communities weitergegeben. Also 1,2 Millionen waren das. Das klingt, als wäre das sehr viel, aber ich meine, wenn man genau drüber nachdenkt, ist das natürlich nicht wirklich viel für die marginalisierten Gruppen. Und wir müssen auf jeden Fall versuchen, weiter zu wachsen und mehr Ressourcen auch zu erlangen. Also unsere Regierung scheint es so darzustellen zu wollen, ja, es gibt keinen Rassismus, ja, wir haben doch hier schwarze Neurowissenschaftlerinnen und wir haben hier und da schwarze Menschen, also ist Rassismus quasi non-existent. Und es ist eigentlich so eine koloniale Amnesie, als ob die Kolonialisierung etwas Gutes war, so wird das dargestellt. Und wir versuchen eben die Wirklichkeit von schwarzen und braunen Menschen in UK darzustellen, die Diskriminierung auf dem Wohnungsmarkt oder Arbeitsmarkt. Vor allem MigrantInnen sind die Gruppen, auf die wir uns richten möchten, weil sie eben sehr wenig Unterstützung von der Regierung bekommen und auch eben oft ja so sehr negativ dargestellt werden. Ich gehe nun über zu der letzten Frage, bevor ich übergehe zur nächsten Person im Panel.
Black Lives Matter.
She should tell that to Meghan Markle. Like, why should
I was trying not to go there, but that's
yeah, but also I didn't really know how to respond to it.
It's so comfortable to say it when it's away from you and it's somewhere else,
know.
in your own family.
But
Like,
I think even let's forget about the interpersonal
Lass uns vergessen über den zwischenmenschlichen Kontext. Es gibt natürlich viel Rassismus in der Familie, aber wenn die Queen wirklich Black Lives Matter wirklich unterstützen würde, dann würde sie all die afrikanischen Trophäen, die in ihrem Schrank stecken, zurückgeben, die ja eigentlich gestohlen sind. Ich möchte nun... Wir wollen uns heute fokussieren auf politische Einbindung. Wenn du über Gegenmacht sprichst, würde ich gerne fragen, wie steht es mit dem dekolonialen Kampf? Es war für uns sehr beeindruckend zu sehen, wie die ersten Statuen in den Thames umgestürzt werden. Nee, das war doch nicht in London, das war in Bristol. Okay. Ich würde gerne wissen, hat der dekoloniale Kampf Also du hast ja über das Funding, also die Finanzierung gesprochen. Es geht aber nicht nur um Geld, es geht um die Umverteilung von Ressourcen und die Anerkennung von Arbeit. Ich komme selber aus einer schwarzen feministischen Gruppe, ADEFRA. Wir haben noch nie so viel Spenden und Finanzierung bekommen wie letztes Jahr von Leuten, die eben bisher nicht mal anerkennen wollten, dass es Rassismus gibt. Und durch dieses Black Lives Matter Movement und die Ermordung von George Floyd, das Video, das alle gesehen haben, es wurde dadurch so klar, auch in der Öffentlichkeit, dass es eben Rassismus gibt. Wir bekommen immer noch Spenden von privaten Spendern, aber auf der anderen Seite scheint die Medienwelt das ganze Thema jetzt hinter sich gelassen zu haben. Kannst du uns etwas erzählen über den dekolonialen Kampf, über den Umsturz von diesen kolonialen Statuen?
Also ich bin eher zögerlich, das als dekolonialen Kampf.
Immerse myself in decolonial politics, in sort of like reading about it, organizing around it. I sort of come to this different perspective where I think that like that was incredibly important. Like the toppling of the Colson statue in Bristol was a really like significant moment in terms of like anti-racist organizing in the UK. But ultimately it was like a symbolic gesture. And like I now, in terms of like when I'm thinking through like decolonial politics.
Und wenn ich mir Gedanken mache über dekoloniale Politiken, möchte ich das letztlich in
political sphere. But I think like materially we have to like situate it in where sort of like colonial struggles and ongoing colonial struggles are
angehende koloniale Kämpfe und antikoloniale Kämpfe.
But like in terms of it being framed as a sort of like anti-racist action, like it was incredible.
Aber in Bezug darauf, dass es geframed wird als so antirassistische Aktion, das war natürlich sehr inspirierend. Wir haben viel davon gesehen.
See it as like spontaneous act, but actually there was a community campaign.
Zum anderen ist es auch ein bisschen dargestellt worden als so spontaner Akt, aber es gab lange davor organisierte Bemühungen, Dinge zu verändern, Dinge umzubenennen, Statuen zu entfernen, weil mehr Leute sich mit der Geschichte befassen.
Where they're living and are trying to sort of like unpack that. And also
wo leben wir eigentlich? Welche Dinge möchten wir in der Öffentlichkeit adressieren? Und das in sich ist ja bereits super aufregend. Ich würde mich auch freuen, mehr davon zu sehen.
I think that like in terms of that being like a really significant political moment in time.
Gleichzeitig, wenn ich darüber nachdenke, dass wir uns ja schon in einem wichtigen so politischen Moment befinden. Auch weil ich weiß, dass es so Repressionskampagnen gibt gegen die Menschen, die beispielsweise diese Aktionen durchgezogen haben.
Whenever there is an anti-racist action, like the state will go out of its way to like wield its power to ensure that something like that never happens again. And so like so actually in response to the massive Black Lives Matter protests that happened, there was a bill that was pushed through Parliament, which is called the Police Crime Court Sentencing Bill. And it is one of the most like draconian pieces of legislation I think that's ever been sort of brought to Parliament. And it's an attempt to, it's a massive attack on all, not just like Black and POC communities, but like all marginalised groups within the UK. So that there's an element to it which is like very anti-Roma, which is attacking the Roma way of life. It's basically banning protests in proximity to sort of like the centre of London. And also if you are to protest or, you know, if you are to disfigure a statue, so statues are important in some way in terms of what they represent around political struggle, you can end up in prison or you can end up with a crazy fine. And it's like quite scary, I think, to be an activist right now, knowing that the forces in power will like come down at you with their full weight. But that doesn't mean that we don't still try and we don't still continue to resist and we don't still organize.
Halimo, thank you so much. I'm so grateful that you broke the ground for us.
Yeah.
And I could keep on going. So I'm not going to respond at this point, but I'm going to link our perspectives together, because you've also ended at, this one round by saying that our struggles are linked, and our lives that have been racially marginalized are under attack, and that at the same time at which we're mobilizing and we're able to gain recognition in the public sphere, at the same time there are also counter moves that actually serve to disempower and to destabilize our life as well. So having spoken about that, I'm going to say very shortly, it's possible to ask questions. There's a band that's being run through at the bottom of the screen. It has a telephone number. Please don't call us. We don't want you to call us, but we'd like you to text us. So please do text us. And then there's also an email address, and you can send your questions or your comments also to that email address. We are looking forward to taking questions and comments from the audience, and we're going to do that at around 12 o'clock. So we'll get back to that. I'm not going to say exactly when. I'm going to try and not dig that hole. So I am extremely excited to be able to talk to you again, Hamze. Hamze, I haven't seen you in a while. I think we just said we've seen each other the last time for 2 years or something at the Pot de Ville. So Hamze Bytyçi, I'm slightly butchering your name. I'm so sorry. I'm going to try and get your name right. You were born in Plzeň in Kosovo. You have been campaigning for equal rights for Roma and Sinti in civil society for several decades. You've been fighting for political inclusion and for the rights, especially of Roma and Sinti communities. You have initiated numerous alliances, associations, and regular events, including Amarudrom and Amaruforo, and the Herdelezi Festival in Berlin. Annual commemorative events on the occasion of the commemoration day of the genocide against Sinti and Roma on August 2nd in Auschwitz and Berlin. You're also active in the Alliance for Solidarity with the Sinti and Roma of Europe, the Links Connects, the ABA Action Alliance, the Roma Day on April 8th in Berlin, the Roma Biennale, and the Roma Film Festival Akedikea. You're very generous. Since 2012, you have been the chairman of RomaTrial, e.V., and since 2016, you have been a member of the state board of the Berlin Left Party. Since 2020, on the board of the NDO, the New German Organizations, neue deutsche Organisation, and since 2021, a member of the CPPD, the Coalition for Pluralistic Public Discourse. So I'm extremely happy to be able to speak to you today in person, and I would like to ask you for the same impulse. Tell us what political inclusion means from the perspective of the racially marginalized communities whose rights to participation and to political inclusion you're fighting for, especially with the rights of Sinti and Roma, obviously in perspective, but also intersectionally. Tell us something about the work you do and how you do that towards political inclusion.
Thank you, Maisha. Yeah, thank you also for having me here. Our sister Halima told the situation abroad is not the same how the situation is in Germany, but I would maybe try to see the bottle half full, what is really difficult, and I'm sorry if I get a little bit aggressive, but I will try to calm down. So the one thing, what we have, for example, in England is that with the Brexit, the situation for the traveler and Roma population now with the Kill the Bill, there is a campaign about people who are traveling, and this is kind of their homes, and if they are stopped somewhere, they are not allowed to stop anywhere. So they even not get a bill, they take their trailers out. And I mean, you see this marginalized situation not only in England, you see it everywhere else too. We thought because we had not the same situation, but similar situation in Czech Republic. So in our neighbor country with Stanislav Tomáš, who was also killed by the police. There were 6 police officers who also killed him in the exactly way how George Floyd was dying. And but then the Prime Minister Babic told that, yeah, he say we can't try to with gloves or whatever, and he was also very, very grateful to the police and said they did a great job. So this is kind of countries who are or who was in the European Union. I don't want to go far to the East Europe situation, what is totally a catastrophic situation in general, but with the pandemic doubled. But I would try to focus about the situation in Germany. So we have this year, 50 year of the anniversary of the Roma movement since 71. But if we see, I would really like to see the cup half full, but it's really difficult because we had with the Social Democrats and with the Greens a terrific situation that they allowed the army go to Afghanistan. So the same was with the past Yugoslavian situation, but there was the second biggest pogrom with Kosovarian Roma. So they fled, of course, flowed away, and that makes 150,000 people not only homeless, it makes an also target from everybody. So the situation is now that people, especially generations who are born or grow up in this country, but doesn't belong to this country, and this country as Land der Täter, Täter, I don't know what is in English.
Perpetrators.
Perpetrator, yeah, the country of the perpetrators. Didn't really recognize it. We got 2012 the memorial, our European memorial, by the German Reichsbahn, who was also kind of in the production of the Nazi regime for bring us to Auschwitz and to the killing concentration camps, is nowadays also the organization who want to build S-Bahn-Trasse, rail through our memorial. I mean, they again opened the box of Pandora. So if people would ask me in the past 90s how the situation is now for us, I would say, yeah, for the Kosovarian people, or for especially for people from past Yugoslavia, it's difficult because I call myself not Kosovarian, I call myself past Yugoslavian or Yugoslavian, because that was how I grew up and came to Germany. I was a young child, but nowadays there are this divide and conquer situation also with neighbors, like friends of me who are Serbians. They make jokes with us, say, we was comrades, but now we are kind of neighbors or whatever. And the situation is for everybody difficult, but for these people who are, again, deported back after 20, 30 years, this here is their home. If you ask the children, they would say, yeah, my father is born in Kiel and the mother in Mannheim or whatever, so this is my home country. And what I would like to make the kind of the red line through the attacks in Rostock-Lichtenhagen, that was a young Roma person from Romania. He was 18 years old who died. Today we have Viorel Paun, who is, for me, he sacrificed his life to protect human being. He was killed by a terrorist. Yes. But the same is not only in Hanau, with Rostock-Lichtenhagen, it's with Munich. There are so many people who are killed from our community, but was never recognized. I don't want even to mention that 500,000, so 500,000 of our population was killed under the regime from this community here. So, but if we talk about what belongs to this country, I would say yes. Even if a person is here 5 years, no matter if they fled from Syria or from Afghanistan or whatever, they belong to this country if they want to belong to this country. And then we have this blood and earth stigma, what is very special for this country. So if we have votes now, 26th of September, means this is really more than strange. And again, I maybe have to take before I get aggressive again, because we have 299 kind of districts where you can vote. So a quarter of the population have a migrant background. If they would be allowed to vote, that means there will be 167 districts or parts who could be possible to vote. That means that now for the left party, the situation is very worse because we are jungling between 6 and 8%, but the Nazis are now double. So, I mean, it's really weird. And 4 years ago, we was afraid that they came to the Bundestag. No, they are not only in the Bundestag, they're in every Landtag. And even I would say, yeah, the situation will be worse, but it will be not only worse for us as migrants, it will be worse for whole Germany and for the people who are watching now. It will be worse for your generations and for your children. Why? In the next 10, 15 years, it's not about the fascists in the parliament. Of course, it's ugly and it's devastating our democratic thinking. No, but what I want to say is they also have the possibility to create a political foundation. So this Erasmus Foundation, that will be, this is evil, because then they will have more than, I don't know how many, thousands of soldiers everywhere. They will be immediately connected with the guys from Trump, immediately with the guys from Johnson, immediately with Bolsonaro, and I don't want to count a lot, but like this, you know, and then people, not our, just I'm in the board of the NDO, I don't want to speak too much, but we have here the Springer Presse, what is not really so in love with us as migrants. So if somebody is more radical or speaks things out, he are demand immediately, and that way we have this, we call it in German, vorauseilenden Gehorsam. So this means we are all in this kind of gauge. So it makes me not only angry, it makes me sad, because also the Bundeszentrale für politische Bildung is also now getting a new jacket of closed things. So they all have to think about
the Federal Agency for Civil Education.
Exactly.
Yes.
If they're allowed even to speak things out,
Yes.
how they spoke it out.
Yes.
That means if we could vote
Yes.
as migrants, and we are here a quarter, that would also jeopardize also more visibility, what is more than important, because these people are not only paying the tax. If you go there in the shops, you think about how is it possible that I get my soup chicken for €2? Somebody have to produce it. So these are the normal, the new modern slaves. They came from Spain, from Greece, from everywhere. They are working 16 hours a day. They really are take them as dirty animals. And I don't know how is it possible to get this in this larger context, because if we talk about the biggest minority in Europe, we are 12 to 15 millions, but we are the less structured or politically aware. So
I'm going to take the chance to actually jump in and try and reinforce two things that you're saying, Hamze. Thank you so much for the reality check. It's even a wake-up call, I would say. And I understand Audre Lorde spoke about the uses of anger. I think that anger is a completely clear, it makes total sense that you're speaking from a place that's extremely enraged. It makes me enraged as well. So you're speaking about the effects of political decisions, and starting by Brexit, and saying how Brexit, in effect, has again opened up this question of how the question of home is always being undermined for Sinti and Roma communities. That I'm deeply empathetic and completely, it floors me. We should all be concerned. I am concerned. So it's a question of what we're going to do about that. and the question of being made homeless. And then also in our own direction and in my own direction, so Visuel Paun is a name that I know died in Hanau. I'd like to understand more about his life and about how being racially marginalized as Roma and Sinti has led to a certain space in which his actions could not give him equal safety, and trying to protect other people also cost him his life. Stanislav Konocek, I haven't, say again?
Stanislav Tomas.
Stanislav Tomas. I'm definitely going to read up on that. It's our responsibility to make those names known, to make the stories that belong to their lives and to their loved ones known. It's extremely problematic that there's little recognition in the public sphere, and that's also on us. It's on me as well. So the question of why Roma and Sinti lives, and I'm going to come to the before I come to your second point. We are in Berlin. Since 2012, there's a commemoration, a memorial for the genocide for the Porajmos, for the genocide against Sinti and Roma. And now the then Reichsbahn and whatever the Bahn now is, wants to build a train station. That's a priority. It's a completely dehumanizing, and for Berlin, it's a situation for a post-colonial and post-migrant Berlin that we cannot live with. So thank you so much for making it clear. We're not talking about anything over there. We're talking about something that's happening in our location at this point. And the second point you opened, because all of you have actually just gone through all my 3 rounds, and the 3 rounds, my 3 concerns are not 3 rounds, I can let it go. I like the way you're speaking about if we had equal representation and people were able to vote. People are being criminalized and marginalized and held outside the vote. And the people who are able to vote are unfortunately people who belong to non-marginalized groups, non-racially marginalized groups. So not all of them, but they're disproportionately able to vote. And I like the consequences that you're also speaking directly to us, to the electorate, and to the public, and saying, it makes a difference if these people are in all our parliaments. So I completely support that point. Thank you so much for making this really, really concise argument. I'm going to move to you, Edith, and then I'll come back to you after Edith and do one last round I think we're going to be able to do before we come to the questions in the audience. The audience is able, there are already questions from the audience, so I'm going to go to Edith and then go to the audience. You're able to give us your questions by email. We have a telephone number. You're able to give us the questions by text. Please don't call us. We only want you to text or email us. So, Edith, I'm going to ask you again the question. I'm going to ask you, you're working on the questions of legalization of migrants. You're talking about the labor that migrants hold our daily life together. Hamze has already spoken about the farm workers. We would not have food also during the pandemic if farm workers were not picking asparagus or vegetables or whatever else we're going to eat. I'm going to stay out of that. So about the rights of domestic workers. Tell us what political inclusion looks like, and tell us maybe a little bit more also about the location in Spain, if you're able.
Estaba escuchando al compañero y lamentablemente todas las cosas que estaba contando me sentía tan representada como persona migrante que reside en España. En España se da la situación de que somos la frontera sur. Entonces hay esta política a través de los medios y de los propios políticos que dicen que los migrantes nos están invadiendo. Y cuando la realidad es que la gran migración de España es de Latinoamérica, no de África, ¿verdad? Pero se crea esta política de que los negros nos están invadiendo. Siguen con este discurso xenófobo de que son violadores, que son asesinos, los marroquíes son terroristas, los gitanos son ladrones, porque hay una gran comunidad gitana en España que no es considerada, o sea, no son considerados españoles. Siguen arrastrando el genocidio que se intentó con ellos desde hace 500 años. se le sigue asesinando en la calle. Hace poco le asesinaron a un chico gitano que fue por eso te escuchaba y decía, esto es tan lejano, pero tan cercano a la vez, ¿verdad? Somos
really,
países distintos, con
something
otros
really
idiomas, y
close,
sin
but
embargo
at the same time from
mantenemos
really
estas
different
mismas
contexts.
políticas de opresión,
But we are still
de
living
exclusión
those
y de mantener a la
exclusion
persona
and
migrante o a
discriminating
la persona
politics.
racializada
The person that
excluida de
is
cualquier política de decisión. En España hay una
in
política
Spain,
que
there is a
dice,
politics that says
que tiene un acuerdo de
there is an
reciprocidad
agreement
con
of
12 países,
reciprocity with
los cuales
12
tienen
countries.
tarjeta de residencia,
They
y a
have their
partir de
residence
estos
card,
5 años de
and with
residencia,
this,
yo puedo votar.
like after
Pero
5
son
years
solo
of
12
living,
países, y
they can
solamente
vote, but
después
it's
de los
just
5
12
años.
countries, and just after 5 years.
Entonces, no hay una
So,
política de información, de
there's no politics
comunicación.
of
Yo como
communication,
migrante
of
residente,
inclusion.
cada vez
Me,
que
as a
quiero
migrant,
acercarme a las urnas,
every time
tengo
I
que
want to
estar
go to vote,
pendiente
I
6
have to
meses antes
see 6 months earlier,
de
before
un
the
censo
elections,
en el cual yo me tengo que inscribir
where
para
I have to
votar.
get inscribed.
No es que
I
ya
have
quedo
to do the
registrada y no
inscription
porque tenga
6
tarjeta de
months before.
residencia,
It's not
yo puedo
automatically.
estar habilitada a
I am
votar.
not
Y hablo
habilitated,
de
I'm
la
not
gente
able to
que
vote
tiene
immediately.
derecho al voto. En España
So it's
existen
people that have
más
the
de
right to vote.
700.000 personas en situación administrativa irregular.
So there is a lot, like 500 or more people
Personas
that are not in that
que residen,
regular
que trabajan, que son
right
vistas
to
como
vote.
un objeto,
People that
pero no
are
como una
seen
persona.
as an object and not as a
Los
person.
campos de cultivo de sangre, la recogida de la fresa que se
The
hace
work
para
in the
toda
fields
Europa, se
that
realiza
is
en
made for the
España.
whole Europe,
Las
that
frutas,
is
las
made in Spain.
hortalizas,
The
todo
fruits,
eso lo recogen
the
los
vegetables,
compañeros
all
marroquíes,
those are
las compañeras senegalesas,
been
los compañeros de
with
Costa
all the
de
migrants from
Marfil, de
Morocco,
Cabo
from
Verde,
Cabo
todas estas-
Verde,
las
from
personas
all those
migrantes.
countries
Hace
that
poco
are migrants.
moría asesinado, y lo digo
And all
asesinado, un
and our
compañero
comrade was
ecuatoriano que estaba
assassinated from Ecuador.
recogiendo
He was
naranjas,
working,
que le
taking
obligaron
oranges.
a
He
recoger
was
la naranja,
forced to
diciéndole
take
tienes
the
que cogerla,
orange,
lo cogió y estaba electrificada
and
y
it
murió
was
en ese mismo
electrified, and he
instante. Una
died in
persona
that
que estaba
moment.
indocumentada y que
A person that
trabajan
was undocumented.
los grandes terratenientes
And the big
de las verduras y las frutas
owners from
no
those places,
permiten
from
el
those fields,
control del
they don't
Ministerio de
permit
Trabajo
the
para ver
control
quién
from
está
the government
trabajando de manera
to see
regular
who is
y quién
working in a
trabaja
regular way
sin
in an
documentación.
unregular
¿Por
way.
qué? Porque no les conviene,
Why?
porque a los
Because it's
migrantes
not
se les
convenient from
contrata
them.
y no se les paga el salario.
Because they are not paid
Se les
and they
paga
don't
con un
have
lugar para
contract,
dormir, que es realmente en el
they
suelo.
just pay like a
No
place
tienen dónde
to
comer,
sleep.
comen una
There's
vez al
not a
día.
place to
Durante la
eat. They
pandemia,
just
en
eat
plena
once
crisis,
during the day.
en Huelva les quemaban las
They were
chozas
born,
que ellos mismos se hacen
their
del
houses
plástico
were burned,
y el palé que recogen
just
de
made
las
out of
frutas.
plastic.
No tienen
So
agua,
they don't
no
have
tienen
water,
luz y
they
encima se
don't
les
have
quema el
light,
poco que tienen.
and
Recuerdo
besides,
el llanto de un
the only
chico,
thing they have is
de
burned.
origen camerunés,
I remember
que se
the
le
crying
quemó,
of a comrade from
su
Morocco
pasaporte,
that his
se le quemó
passport was
todos los
burned,
documentos que él iba a
all of
demostrar,
his
porque la
documents
semana
that he
siguiente
wanted to
tenía la
show,
cita,
because the
y
next week
después de
he
más de
had
10 años
the
de
appointment
conseguir
after
un
10
contrato,
years of
poder
getting a
pedir los
contract.
papeles, se le quemó todo y se quedó
So
sin
all of
ninguna
that,
prueba.
what he had was burned.
Todas estas injusticias
All of those
no son
injustices
vistas o son
are not
apagadas
visible
por
or
los
are
comentarios
not
que sí
seen
tienen cabida
by
en
the
los platos de
comments
TV,
of the people
que son de
in the
los partidos
TVs
que son
or in the
claramente de
political
ultraderecha,
parties that are, of course,
que se
from the
abanderan
extreme
con un
right.
compañero que dicen el negro de Vox.
They say the black
Un
from the
compañero
box,
negro que está con ellos.
because there's a comrade
Entonces, cada
that is
vez
with
hay
them.
más un discurso más fuerte, más
So the
violento,
speech
que
is
aprueba,
every time harder, stronger.
el asesinato,
A speech
el
that
maltrato y la
approves
opresión
the
de las
assassination, the
personas
discrimination
racializadas,
of
no
all
solamente las
racialized
personas
people,
migrantes, porque
not
estamos de
just the
todos en
migrant people,
España.
because we
Entonces,
have a
hacer
lot
este
of
paso
people
de la inclusión
from
cuando ya
everywhere.
tienes todas estas
After
barreras
all,
es prácticamente imposible. Es prácticamente imposible. Por eso nosotras hablamos de la mochila
that's why we
del
talk about the
cansancio.
backpack of
Venís ya con una
disappointment.
vida oprimida. Venís
It's like
someterte
life
otra
with
vez a todas
oppression,
estas políticas que te
with all
excluyen.
of these
En la
politics that
calle que te
exclude
griten
you.
cosas.
In the street,
Se le da
people
al
scream
migrante
at you.
como una persona que
We
viene a
see the
trabajar,
migrant
una mano de
just
obra
as a
barata,
person that comes
una
to
persona
work,
que viene a buscar caridad.
as
en las colas
cheap
del hambre,
labor.
hace poco a una mujer ecuatoriana
Just some
la
time ago, a
acuchillaron,
woman from Ecuador
una
was
mujer
assassinated.
española, porque viene a robarnos el
A
trabajo
woman
y
from
la
Spain
comida.
assassinated her because she was
Entonces,
just
todas estas
stealing
políticas,
work,
estas
she
agresiones que
said.
realizan las propias
So all of
personas
this
que se
politics
ven envalentonadas, porque
all
tienen
of
un
this
discurso que dice,
discrimination,
si tú puedes hacer eso,
there
ellos
is a
son
speech
ladrones,
that
ellos
says
vienen
that
a
you can't do that
asesinarnos,
because
ellos
they
vienen a robarnos.
say they are
Es muy
discriminate,
violento
that they come
que cada
to
12 de octubre
to
se
steal the
celebre la
job, to
hispanidad.
steal
Para
everything
América
from us.
Latina es el genocidio vivo.
So we
Cuando ella
live
hablaba de las
the
estatuas,
genocide. The genocide
nosotros
is
el año
alive.
pasado hicimos
So
una
about the statues,
representación
last
en
year
la
we did
Plaza Colón y fuimos a teñir de rojo
representation in the Cologne place.
el lago que tienen ahí, ¿verdad?
We
Fue
did a whole performance with red
una
painter,
movilización que
and we did a
hicimos a
mobilization,
escondidas entre
but
personas
hiding,
selectas
like
para
with
que no nos
selected
descubra la
people, so
policía,
that the police
porque
doesn't
íbamos a tener una
find
sanción.
out,
¿Verdad?
because we
Pero
would be
fue tan
punished.
grande ese boca a boca que lo hicimos
So
despacito
that
que la comunidad se levantó
mobilization
y
that
se
we
juntó,
organized
que es lo bonito cuando
was
trabajamos
really
por la
invisible, but we did
regularización
it together.
de que las personas
We
que ya
work
tienen
for the
los papeles
regularization,
o
for
que ya
the
están
documentation,
nacionalizados se dan cuenta
because
esa
the
fue
people
mi
that
vida
already
también,
have that,
porque
they
ningún
realize that they all
migrante en España
had
puede
that in
decir
their
que
lives,
tuvo
that they
una
also
vida
lived
fácil.
that before. No one can say that they have
no lo sienten
a easy
las
life.
agresiones
They
racistas
live it
porque ya
that too
están
in
tan
Spain, everyone.
colonizados, como decimos nosotros internamente,
We say
que
that
descolonizarse
a lot of people
es
just
muy duro.
have a
Nosotras
colonial
seguimos con el
heritage
movimiento,
in
nada de
themselves,
celebrar,
but
lo
we say
hacemos
that they
cada
have
12
to
de octubre,
decolonize,
salimos a las calles a
decolonize
marchar
themselves.
para
We go
demostrar
to
que todos
demonstrate
somos
in the streets
que
to
debemos
show
crear
that we
esta
all have to
inclusión, no
create this
integración, porque a mí la
inclusion.
palabra
I
integración
don't
me
like the
parece
word
nefasta, sino
integration.
inclusión.
I
Porque
want to
nosotras
fight for
tenemos que
inclusion.
seguir manteniendo
We
nuestras
have to
ideas,
maintain
nuestras
our
formas de
ideas,
comunicarnos,
our ways
nuestras
of being,
formas de crear
our ways
comunidad.
of creating community.
Recientemente, por primera vez en
Just
Madrid,
in the first
tuvo su
time,
primer
Madrid
representante
had
negro
a first
en
black
estas elecciones anticipadas que fueron en mayo, ¿verdad?
in these
Nosotros
elections in May.
invitamos a los
We
compañeros
invited
migrantes que
the
estaban en las listas, que siempre
comrades,
son
the migrant
colocados
comrades
al final,
that are just in the end
Sylvain
always
Valle, que es
marginalized.
que es senegalés, ya
He is from
nacionalizado.
Senegal,
Él es
he's
del
already
Sindicato
nationalized.
Cementeros de Madrid,
He is from
¿verdad?
the syndicate
Un sindicato que
of
procura
workers
mantener a
from
sus
the street.
compañeros, que los senegaleses lo tienen muy duro
People from
para
Senegal
conseguir los papeles.
have it really difficult
Entonces, cuando él
to get
llegó,
the papers.
primero lo pusieron en un puesto 14.
So
Y
first of
dado
all,
la
they put it
presión
in the
del
14th
movimiento
place,
antirracista y de que
and
tenía
he's part from
realmente
the
una
anti-racist
figura muy
movement.
polémica, que
He had
salía en
like a
los
very
medios de
polemic figure.
comunicación, el mismo partido
He
político
was in the
que es de
media,
izquierdas,
very
que es Unidas
visible.
Podemos,
And the
decidió
Podemos, this
elevarle
party
un poquito más
from the left,
en el escalafón y
decided
entró
to
en el puesto
elevate
número
him
9
a
con
little
Unidas
bit to
Podemos.
the
Y tenemos un
9th position.
representante en la Comunidad de Madrid
And we have
que
a
sabemos que es
representative from
antirracista, que puede
the
luchar por
movement that is
políticas,
anti-racist,
no de
that
extranjería,
he can
pero sí
fight
por
for
políticas
us,
que puedan llegar a la
for
comunidad
politics that can
racializada. Para nosotras esa
fight
es
for
una representación
representation.
que no tenemos en España.
We don't have that in
Es
Spain.
muy difícil
It's really
conseguir
difficult to
en
get
el
that in
Senado
Spain.
por primera vez.
In
Y
the-
es lo triste que siempre digan, el primer negro
The
de esto,
senators
el primer
just say like this is the
latino,
first
el primer
black, the
gitano,
first
¿verdad?
Latin,
O sea,
the
siempre es
first
el primero y se
Roma.
queda en eso,
They
porque
just say
después no
that
vuelve a surgir.
because after that there's nothing more.
Edith, thank you so much. I'd like to
Muchas gracias.
Me
gustaría reforzar dos puntos.
I could go into, because you actually towards the end began telling us about the strategies.
Primero nos hablaste sobre las estrategias, de cómo te organizas, cómo usan el espacio público y cuáles son las consideraciones para proteger a personas marginalizadas, así como los efectos de la policía, las deportaciones, por ejemplo, así como la deportación, que es una realidad siempre. Entonces me gustaría que contaras más, pero primero tengo que tomar preguntas de la audiencia. Tengo que tomar también algunas preguntas del público. Pero también me gustaría ir más profundo. Voy a decir dos cosas. Has hecho un análisis muy conciso
political
de cómo
instruments are
los
manipulated,
instrumentos políticos son
to create
manipulados.
racially excluding politics, and speaking from the location of Spain, where there is a model that could actually work
Hay un
towards
modelo
trying to
que
get more access to be able to vote,
da acceso al voto,
but uses high barriers
pero que
that are
usa
going to disproportionately meet racially marginalized communities, because who is going to register 6
comunidades
months
marginalizadas.
before? I forget almost everything.
Casi
How
siempre
are you
me
going
olvido,
to ensure,
pero ¿cómo vas a
instead of making
asegurar?
it easy to vote, you're making it harder for certain groups to vote?
¿Cómo vas a
But
asegurar
it's
que
still a
las
model
personas
saying
puedan
it's an
votar,
agreement
por
with 12
ejemplo?
countries. So we have some models that we can actually
O sea,
take
tenemos algunos modelos de otros
try to
países que
expand on those
han dado
models and look at how
su ejemplo
racist and
contra la discriminación racista, contra la norma colonial.
So I really like the point
Entonces
you
me
made
gusta
around
mucho
that.
tu
And
punto.
the other point that I would like to
Y el
pick
otro
out of the
punto
very many points you made
que
is the question
mencionaste
of how normalization is
es
prevented.
cómo
So again, we're speaking about
se
how
previene
racially
la discriminación.
marginalized
O
groups,
sea, que hay grupos
communities are being
marginalizados
terrorized.
que
They're
se
having their homes
representan
burned,
como
they're being forced
terroristas
to be in work circumstances
y
where they
que,
cannot just relax because
y que no
at
se
some point it's clear this is how you're paid, this is how you're being paid fairly, you can live in an area where
O
your
sea, que
family feels safe. So there's this whole, not just the lack of normalization, but actually
O sea, no es solamente una
normalization is
falta
being
de-
constantly prevented and going into
marginalización,
all these
sino
assassinations that you spoke of
asesinatos,
and names that we also need to know and need to publicize. So that's also
y
work
que hay
that's
que
important for
publicar
us that we're
nombres
able
que
to
hay que
publicize these
publicar,
struggles.
por ejemplo.
I would have liked to have heard more, especially about the domestic workers. So
Así
off
también
script,
me
I'm going
gustaría
to
hablar
speak to
del
you more
trabajo
about that,
doméstico
and I'm hoping
y te
we're going
voy
to
a
have we're going to be able to work around that also within the context of the NDO, the Neue Deutsche Organisation, the new German organizations. Maybe at a later point we're able to talk about the situation of domestic workers, also whose situation is also made very invisible. They do work that's it's a work that makes all other work possible, care work, but then we don't see they have little public sphere. So I would definitely like to talk about that. I would like to tell you some questions that our audience is concerned with. So our audience wants to know, what is your hope for the time after the elections? Usually it's a question we say about 100 days after September 26th, what we want to see has happened by then. What has to be done by politicians? And there are 3 questions, so I'm going to read all of them, and then any of you can take questions. The other question, which I think is an extremely important question, is how can our struggles become more transnational? So about the multi-layeredness of our struggles as well. I'm going to, do you need a little bit more time for the translation? Is that what's going on?
No.
No, it's
Bueno.
translation is not coming through.
No,
Hola.
ahora sí me
Ahora
escuchas,
sí,
¿sí?
ahora
Sí,
sí.
ahora
It's
sí.
coming through now.
Okay.
Ahora
Good.
sí, ahora sí.
We'll work with everything. We set up the
Vamos a
spaces. A
trabajar
lot
con
of
todo
work is
tipo
behind the
de
scenes. We make the
cosas.
space
Hay mucho
possible.
trabajo detrás
And
de las
if it
escenas.
doesn't work immediately,
Y
it's
si no
just
funciona
we'll just keep going
inmediatamente,
and try
vamos a
and
intentar
find
seguir
out if there's
haciéndolo.
missing information, to
Vamos
find
a
out the
ver si
information and
falta
kind of
información.
just put it out there. So all the names that you
Entonces,
spoke
todos los
about
nombres que
in the context
ustedes
of Spain, I
hablaron,
would definitely
todos
like
los
to have
nombres
those
que
names up also on the
mencionaron,
website so I
me
know them.
gustaría
And so
tenerlos
we speak more
para
about their life
poder
stories,
hablar
and so
de
that their loved
eso
ones can
luego,
also know their lives are not forgotten.
porque no son olvidados.
How can our struggles become more transnational?
¿Cómo podemos hacer
The
que
loss of racially
nues-
marginalized lives. I'm trying not to cry on stage, but here we go. The older I get, the more emotional I get. So the question around how our struggles can become more transnational is a very pertinent question. How can we carry more and make more of our lives and the meaning of our lives that are under attack by racist norms, by norms of coloniality? How do we make these struggles more transnational? And a question I have here as well is, we have heard about how dangerous activism is in the UK. How is it in other countries? When the question of weaponization, you all spoke about the question of demonization, about how activities that belong to our lives, are cause to our lives, are made criminalized. So that's a question around there. I'm going to ask you each to decide which of these questions you want to answer, and I'm just going to go back to you and start with you, Hamze. I'm going to ask you all to keep the answers brief. At some point, I'll just ask you to move to the next person because I'm looking. I'm looking at the time.
Yeah.
So Hamze, you
I
have
tried to make it very
Yes,
fast.
yes,
So the
please.
one thing is we had the NSU series, and yesterday was Enver Şimşek's death day, and I was invited in Weimar, and they make the whole in a way also weird, how you say it, Rückblick.
A blend backwards.
Exactly,
backwards.
what really happens. So what happens after 10 years?
Yes.
And it shocks me that, I mean, they began from beginning with very racial demanding the migrants like Dönermord and all this stuff.
At the beginning of the investigation.
Exactly.
Of the complex.
And then one of the person belongs to the state. So Kiesewetter was a police officer. She was killed. What I want to say is in Heilbronn is Kiesewetter, and we have the guy from the CDU.
A politician?
A politician from who was also killed now.
Yes. Lübke, is this Lübke?
Lübke, very good, yeah.
My memory is so bad.
Yeah, but every city have something where they have to recover things.
About the loss of life,
and that means how dangerous is our life as activists. I would say we lived until now in very comfort zones. I think it will be worse in the next 5 or 15 years. So because these people, they copy-paste also movements from us, from the left thinkers. So they do the same, especially they go now in the suburb, they go in Brandenburg, they go in other countries where they land, and they create things that is very dangerous for us. But what
It's an escalation of far right.
Yeah, and
aggression and violence.
Aggression, but they killed people from the state system. So this is what I want to say. So that was not one person, that was not 2%, it will be more. And that way I would say the allies between us have to be more together. It starts, of course, I mean, if Halle began, if the situation with Hannah was so crazy and ugly that the people go in Köln or whatever they did this carnival. So I'm very superstitious, but I think that came from God, that they become this kind of with pandemic and all this stuff. No, it's stupid, but this is what I want to say. But then we had the situation also with George Floyd, what give us a new wave of not only solidarity but also overthinking, because we are very good as Germany to point out to other countries, but then we realize, because we always said we are not racist, even if we killed in the First World War, it was our fault, the Second World War, and a lot of other things. But anyway,
what a coincidence.
Yeah, exactly, and it's always Einzeltäter. What I want to say is that we have to be aware, but we have to get a structure of. Because we also, especially in the left groups, are always in kind of stupid, how I say
inner
it?
fighting?
Yeah, it's fighting. It's something like, we don't need it, you know? This is something.
I'm going to call it slightly neurotic, but no one should. Sometimes we are very intensely dealing with our own inner strife.
Exactly.
Yes.
But I would say, and I would love just to say that the cup is half full, but I don't know, to be honest, after 100 days of votes, I'm just happy that they didn't took this guy who had to be from the CDU. I'm very happy about it, because then I would say CDU get more votes. But anyway, Laschet is somebody who is not good for the country. This is clear. But what I want to say is that the fault of the media, what is
not
very
for the country just to support it would mean not really a person who's going to achieve political inclusion in a manner that racially marginalized groups would even be.
Not only about the flout what is came, but also he said that people from the new EU countries like Bulgarian or Romanian, our kind of new slaves, are fault of the pandemic and all these stupid things. This is what he said, and I said, come on, man. But what I want to say is what the media is doing, especially with women, with Baerbock. So she did for sure some mistakes, but how they jeopardized her.
The media is completely problematic.
Absolutely, but this is what I want to say. If we go on the street, and that is my last sentence, but 2018, we had this Unteilbar demo. There was 250,000 on the street. It was such an important and a good feeling. This time, of course, we had kind of strikes with the trains and whatever, and we had something like 20 or 30,000. Anyway, what I want to say is the situation is not like we are on fire. We are like, okay, we are stimulated to have a good feeling of. No, I think it gets kind of weird. And this is what I want to say, that even if we have so much inclusion and things starts to happen, I don't know what would be the masterpiece of to bring this. Yes, of course, we need everybody who can vote, but I think also the old parties have to wake up and to explain themselves that they need this human being for this country. Yeah.
I like that. I like that. So one, you said it very on the bylines, but Hamze just said everybody who can vote, go out and vote. I hope you don't need more incentive than that. Seriously, go out and vote. That's number one. And number two, we have to think about what kind of humans we need to lead us in situations. Yeah. During the pandemic crisis, it was clear we need a certain kind of human to lead us through that. If domestic workers, care workers, farm workers, food workers, grocery workers are steering us through the pandemic, we need a human who understands that. So I thank you for that point. Thank you so much. I'm going to come to you, Halimo, and I'm going to ask you the same thing. This set of questions, where would you like to say something?
I've been thinking about sort of like transnational sort of networks, and well, it sort of like made me think about, obviously there's massive importance in trying to build solidarity amongst like marginalized groups, and I think that what we're lacking currently is like a massive transnational network. We're currently in our silos and, you know, trying to tackle the many sort of like issues that we're facing. Actually, recently I was listening to this incredible podcast with Selma James, who's this long-standing feminist thinker, activist. She did incredible campaigns around like wages for housework. And she was describing some of the work that they're doing in Crossroads Women's Centre in terms of like specifically building networks. And that looks like reaching out to seeing precarity, seeing issues that exist across the globe, reaching out to organisers on the ground and offering mutual aid and support and solidarity in whichever way that you can. But the key thing is that we need to be speaking to each other and trying to identify the patterns that exist. And because obviously there's a global network of power, and I think sometimes we feel the impacts of that, but we're not really able to like respond to it in the same kind of way in which it's like meting out to us. So they were doing incredible work around sort of like women farmers in India, and I think we need to also think about like where we can alleviate burdens from like different sort of like struggles across the globe, and what that can look like. Does it look like, you know, organising a strike fund for striking workers in another part of the world? Is it just, you know, being able to offer solidarity, asking them what they need, you know, words of encouragement when they win, and like, like sort of like conciliations. Is that the word that I'm looking for? When they lose, but you know, picking them back up and you know, being encouraging and acknowledging that we're engaging with a global fight against structures, and together we'll win.
I'm going to say something that I really like about, you talked about counterpower, building counterpower before, and now in the global fight against intersectional discrimination, you're speaking very much about a hands-on approach that is not metaphorical. I also had your point before when you spoke about that decoloniality is not metaphorical. It's about land, about materiality. It's about giving things back that are in cupboards and cellars that people aren't even looking at. But like jewels, the Kohinoor, I don't know, it hasn't been given back like to different geopolitical areas that were invaded and colonized. So it's very, very material. Yeah. And now you're speaking about building solidarities between marginalized communities, but also not only on a symbolic level, hands down asking.
I think like what I want to emphasize is that what we need to do is develop an analysis of how like power operates, and as a result of that, develop tactics to like respond to that. And there's so much organizing happening across the globe, and there's like really exciting pockets of organizing. What we need to do is be able to like learn from each other and progress our aims collectively.
I like that. I want to be part of a tactical team. I already have a t-shirt, I think an outfit for my tactical team. I'm going to come to you. We have about 8 minutes to go in our panel discussion. We are nearing the end. I would like to end with you, Edith. I'd like to ask you also about the question of how dangerous activism is. You've already touched on it very slightly, how our struggles become transnational, what your hope is for the time after the elections, anywhere you would like, or anywhere you would like to also from the responses to say something about for our almost last round?
No, más que nada que todas las luchas tienen que ser en red. O sea, no se puede crecer de forma individual, porque eso es lo que siempre se estuvo haciendo y eso está mal. O sea, en algún punto todos nos unimos y podemos crear. O sea, nosotras como asociación somos parte de todas las redes que confluyen en la misma idea, que es proteger a la persona que está sin protección, que en este caso son las personas migrantes en España, porque no sé si saben, pero en España están las cárceles para personas migrantes. Inclusive una de estas cárceles era una perrera antigua y se sigue manteniendo en esa estructura, ¿verdad? De cómo son utilizadas siempre. Entonces, llegar a confluir en una misma idea de trabajar no es fácil, pero sí se puede. Entonces, hacer algo transnacional,
So to do something
por lo menos
transnational,
en un solo punto,
especially in one
eso sería
point,
lo importante.
just in one
Porque
point, it would be really important.
hay algo que tiene que unirnos.
So
No
there
puede
is
ser
one thing that
que
can
sigamos
unite
siendo
us. It cannot
excluidas,
be that
que tengamos
we are
los
all
mismos
excluded.
problemas, quizás
It cannot be
en
that
una
we
escala
have
más
the
fuerte, en una
same
escala
problems or in
minoritaria,
different
pero si no
ways,
nos unimos
but if we don't
realmente
get
y
united
creamos un
and we
núcleo
create
donde no
a
importa quién tiene más
nucleus,
dinero y
and
quién
it's
tiene
not
más
the
poder,
thing
sino que
of
realmente
who has
lleguemos
more
a
money
confluir
or
en
who
las
has less,
ideas,
but
no vamos a
just to
poder
get to
hacer
one
el
point
derribo
together.
hacia el poder que sí están
If not, we will not
confluidos en lo mismo.
create
Ellos
the
buscan poder,
resistance
ellos
against
buscan
power,
dinero y es lo
because they
único
want
que les
power,
une.
they
No
want money, and
importa
that's the
cómo
only thing
unirse
they want.
si todos vamos a tener dinero.
So
Entonces, con
there's
eso
no
no quiero
point to get
decir que
united
está
if we
bien
want
dejar
money.
las ideas y ser
So I don't want to
pasarnos
say
al lado
that we
malo,
don't have
sino
to
que simplemente buscar ese punto de unión
fight for
donde
ideas, but we
podamos
have to
trabajar
fight for
en
one
una
point
manera
together that unites us,
interracial, en una
so that we
manera
can work in
donde
an
todos tengamos la
interracial
misma
way,
voz. Es difícil
where all of
trabajar en
us
asamblea,
have the
es
same
difícil
voice.
trabajar con los
It's
activistas
difficult
que
to work
siempre
in
creemos
assembly,
que tenemos la razón,
and
¿verdad?
that we
Pero es que
always
hay que
think we have,
confluir porque es la única
we are
forma.
right,
Cuando
but it's the
llegamos
only
a
way we have.
regularización ya,
When we are working in
llegamos
regularization
112
now,
asociaciones.
there
Y a
was
la par que
112
sacamos la
associations,
carta, nos
and
unimos
when we
más de
did
1.500
the
entidades organizativas en
the
España.
letter, we united
Entonces,
even
vamos
more, hundreds
confluyendo.
more, so
Hay
we
cosas que
get
no nos
all
gustan
to
que la
some point.
compañera o el
There is
compañero
always
haga
stuff that we
en
don't
esta
like.
asociación, que la mayoría de
For
las
example, from
ONG
another
ven a la
association
persona
or
migrante
another
como
NGO,
su paraguas
the NGO
para
sees
conseguir una
migrants as
subvención y tenerle
people to
siempre
get some
bajo sus
money, to
alas
get some
y no darle esa
resources,
independencia, ese
without
empoderamiento que tiene
autonomy,
que tener
without
la persona.
independence.
Entonces es difícil
But it's
trabajar, pero no
difficult, so,
imposible.
but it's not
Nosotras lo hemos
impossible.
demostrado,
We
hemos
demonstrated,
llevado
we did
al
it,
gobierno nuestras,
we showed that we
nuestras
can do it. We
peticiones,
showed
hemos
the
llegado
government
hasta el
our
Congreso
demands.
y seguimos
We were in the
reuniéndonos con
Congress,
partidos políticos.
so we are still in
Hemos
meetings
conseguido
with
que
the
otros
political
partidos
parties.
políticos
We met
respalden
with several
nuestras
political
exigencias y
parties, and
seguimos
we are
trabajando
still
en eso.
working to
Entonces
get
sí
there.
se puede, diciendo hasta aquí es mi punto,
So
no te
until
pases
this
de
point I
esto,
get,
porque en esto no vamos a caer.
but we will not
Entonces estar con 5 o 6
leave those
ojos
points.
abiertos,
So those
ni
are
siquiera
our
los dos,
limits.
porque
We
eso no
have
nos ayuda,
specific
pero sí
demands,
que hay que confluir
but
y
we
crear
need to
algo
find common
transnacional.
points
Y
and
me
create
estaba
something
acordando lo que decía el
transnational.
compañero, cuando ocurre un
So
ataque
I heard the
racista,
comrade,
siempre es
and I
mejor
said,
mirar a
yeah, when
Estados
there is
Unidos,
a
ellos son los
racist
racistas,
attack,
hay que
we
malos
also see
son, ¿verdad?
USA
Y
as
no
the
quieren
bad ones.
aceptar los hechos que
But here they
suceden
don't want
en
to
nuestros
accept that this
países.
happens also in
Siempre
our
son
countries.
anecdóticos. Es que es
And yeah,
solamente
it's
una vez, solamente pasa en
neuroses.
este caso.
So it's just
Fue
over
algo
there.
casual.
It was
Nunca
something
aceptan. La
exceptional,
comunidad
and they never
LGTBI en España
accept
está
that the community
sufriendo
of
un
LGBT.
To have the
Edith,
last
muchas
word from our guests, from our panel guests, your intense perspective on the interconnectedness of our survival and how we arrive at equal protection and equal safety by paying attention to that interconnectedness. And the question of unifying, mobilizing and redistribution, while at the same time being specific, so featuring specific struggles, is extremely, it's a vision that I think that we can also reach in 100 days. I am hoping we can start working towards it. At least you're making me think in very concrete terms. So the new German organizations, the neue deutsche Organisation, they facilitate this Congress here in cooperation with the Federal Agency for Political and Civic Education. And within that frame, it would be interesting to find out if we're able to actually speaking also from what we've learned in pandemic times, if we're able to build online archives that would actually show the stories of loss, but also of transformation. So I'm not going to go very deeply because for some reason today, when I think about the loss of these lives, about the orange, the picture that you showed about picking the orange and being electrified, I'm not going to go there because I don't have the membrane today to keep that away from my emotional state. But it would be a thing that we could achieve, that we are able. I want to be able to speak the names of Roma and Sinti comrades who are losing their lives at the same time at which we are losing our lives through institutionalized anti-blackness and also through societal anti-blackness. I want to speak the names of the diasporan Senegalese, Moroccan / Spain, of Latin American, Paraguayan, of Ecuadorian comrades, LGBTI comrades. We are many things at the same time, trans and inter comrades who are losing their lives due to a political structure that thinks our lives are disposable, or at least treats us as though our lives are disposable, and treats us as though we are clients to further their political agenda, while we are, as we see, Hamze is you're a political candidate yourself. So we are also at the same time active politicians. We're trying to come into this field and trying not to be weaponized against our own communities, obviously. So within the complexity of what your perspectives have opened in this panel, I think there are things that we can do in the next 100 days, at least in the next 365 days. I heard about the struggles of domestic workers and their organizing from context, from the NDO context. So this is a theme that is constantly recurring here. I would now like to know about the concrete stories, and if we have to protect them in the ways in which we protect them, I want to teach about those stories. We need to have those stories taught because their resilience and its transformative knowledge that our racially marginalized young people who are in schools and who are learning a lot of curricula that does not take their realities into context. So these migrant workers, fruit pickers, and so on, they have children who are in the education system and who are not learning about their precarity and about their houses being burned and passports being burned and what it means, how it leads to an electrification. So I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to thank you all. I'm going to thank you, Edith, Hamze, Halimo. It was a pleasure.